This is GARIS, Masculist, MGTOW flyers, that is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de GARIS. This is flyer number 357, entitled Why Some Men Are Threatened by Masculism, or Why Masculism Threatens Some Men. This is part 2, a rather long flyer of 3 parts. So, continuing straight on. 4. There's a taboo on men against criticising women. Most boys are largely raised by women, by alien giants called mothers. Mothers are women, so it is in women's self-interest to inculcate into their sons that men exist on this earth to pay for women to have babies. Women teach their sons, and so do most traditional fathers, that the son's role in life is to pay for and protect women. It's therefore taboo for men to criticise women, since criticising them would counter men's lifelong pro-women conditioning. With the modern rise of feminism, the taboo on criticising women is now even stronger. Feminists pump men full of the idea that it is men who oppress women, and that the gender oppressors are men, that gender oppression is a one-way street. So most men feel severely constrained when desiring to criticise women. This is why masculists talk about the need for masculist consciousness raising, that is, becoming educated as to how women oppress men, for example, through women's financial parasitism, women's man-slavery, women's not loving men for themselves but for men's sexploitability, women's monkey branching, that is, always on the lookout for a more sexploitable male who will give her more resources for her and her kids that was genetically selected for in women over millions of years. Close brackets. Masculinist consciousness raising gives men the courage to break the taboo on criticising women by making men conscious that gender oppression is definitely a two-way street, that most women are still fluffy parasites, fluffy feminist hypocrites, that 3/4 of young women choose to become fluffy crappers, studying fluffy crap majors at high school that will preclude them from getting STEM and professional diplomas as adults, thus pushing them to look around for some gullible manslave to parasite upon, so that he pays for her to live in a middle-class house to raise her kids in, so that a decade later she can divorce him, take his house, kids, half his stuff, his money, and toss him on the scrap heap. Men need to toss off the taboo on criticising women, so that they can learn to become angry at women for the horrible things that women do to men. This taboo needs to be destroyed. 5. Men's existential fear of what will I do with my life? Sons grow up, by definition, with fathers who serve as a role model for their kids, for their sons. These fathers work for their families, usually paying for the wife and their kids. So sons grow up expecting to be like their fathers, so expect to find some sexually attractive woman, marry her, have kids, and pay for them. That is the script for their lives, and most men don't even question this traditional role. I know, I was like that in my 20s, half a century ago. Now we live in the growing age of masculism, where such traditional expectations on men by fathers, mothers, girlfriends, friends, society, movies, the media, etc. are now being questioned, and a growing number of cases overthrown. As men become exposed to masculist and MGTOW, that's men going their own way, ideas increasingly, they are faced with the question, quote, if I reject the traditional role of being a husband and father, what on earth will I do with my life? Who would I be? What would become of me? A lot of men feel lost, existentially lost, with such a prospect of being a MGTOW or a MGTOW monk, in brackets, who is so pissed off with female sexploitative nature that they live sexless lives. There are other MGTOWs who do have part-time girlfriends who have separate apartments that they have relationships with to get some regular sex, but by definition refuse to marry, reject paternity, and spend their money on themselves. If the girlfriend starts whining about wanting a baby, he dumps her and finds another cunt to penis. Not all men are capable of refocusing their lives away from being fathers. If you become a masculist, living the MGTOW lifestyle, you'll need to give yourself a real focus to your life. You will need to find your passion and devote your time and energy to it. Not all men are capable of doing this and prefer the traditional role of being a manslave to a woman, paying for her to have her kids so that he does not have to create his own life. A lot of men join the army because they don't know what to do with their lives, so prefer that the army tells them what to do. Similarly, many men feel lost when considering becoming a MGTOW. They feel existentially threatened by the prospect of a void in their lives. Some men are just not built to be MGTOWs and masculists, creating their own lives, defining their own path in life, doing what they want to do and not what some parasiting female wants them to do, that is, to pay for them to have babies. 6. If I criticize women, the feminists will attack me. After half a century of monoconscious feminism, that is, a feminism that believes that gender oppression is a one-way street, many men are so brainwashed into this idea that they think that if they criticize women, then that will merely reinforce the attitude that feminists have that men oppress women, which will make these feminists even angrier, who then lash out at men who criticize them. It usually does not occur to these men that this attitude of the feminists make them feminazis, that is, particularly obnoxious feminists, who have the hypocritical attitude that it's, quote, "It's okay for feminists to lash out at men, but it's not okay for masculists, to lash out at women." Most men know nothing about masculist ideas, so don't have the intellectual tools to be able to stand up to a feminazi tirade against men, so prefer to keep quiet when feminazis attack men in conversation, in groups, in the media, etc. Such men feel afraid that if they absorb masculist ideas and attack women, then these women will explode in rage against them. These men don't want that hassle. And if they want to penis a given woman, they don't want to risk attacking her with masculist ideas, because then there is no way he will get his dick wet. 7. Men are zombied by the male frontal lobe switch off. Most young women know instinctively and are often taught by their mothers that the way to control a man, to get him to do what a woman wants, is to fuck him a lot early in the relationship so that she has him around her little finger, controlling him like a puppy who does what she wants in order to get the sex from her that he craves. There's a lot of truth to this traditional strategy, and men need to know about its cause. Unfortunately for men, nature conspires against them in the form of the male frontal lobe switch off, which is something that all men should know about. When a man sees his regular female sexual partner, the frontal lobes of his brain switch off. The frontal lobes are responsible for planning and critical thinking. Women don't have this phenomenon, so are better able to think rationally about how they want to manipulate men to her advantage. When a man sees his regular female sexual partner, he anticipates the sexual pleasure of orgasm when his brain is flooded with pleasure hormones, making him feel on a high that he craves, like a drug addict. To produce this feeling, this conditioning, like one of Pavlov's famous dogs, in brackets, who learn to salivate at the sound of a bell alone, after being exposed to meat and the bell simultaneously, several times in the past. Close brackets. In Pavlov's style, a man soon associates the sight of his regular female sexual partner with sexual pleasure. So when he sees her, his frontal lobes switch off, caused by the flood of pleasure hormones in his brain, anticipating sex with her. To cause this effect, a young woman knows that all she has to do is fuck him like crazy early on in the relationship and he becomes her slave. And capital letters for emphasis, all men need to know about this vulnerability that all men have. Double exclamation marks. Men need to learn not to make important decisions concerning their relationships with their female sexual partners when these women are within sight. Men need to know that they become putty to these sexually controlling women. Women know this instinctively, however most men don't, but should. So one of the major tasks of the Masculist is to teach all men of the great importance of the phenomenon of male frontal lobe switch off, so that they do not fall victim to sexploitative females who are looking to snare a gullible manslave so that he pays for her to have her kids. Men, be aware. 8. Male feminists are monoconscious ignorami. I once had a rather nasty experience with a dyed-in-the-wool male feminist at Melbourne University about a year back. He was obviously a male feminist because he was assisting his feminist girlfriend handing out flyers to passers-by. He felt a certain moral superiority in being a male feminist by being more liberal and tolerant than most males. I started telling him that because his girlfriend is a feminist, that if he marries her and has kids, the odds are much higher that his feminist wife will turn into a real feminazi, divorcing him, financially destroying him, crucifying him, stripping him of his kids, etc. I suggested he Google and YouTube the topic of masculism and MGTOW to raise his consciousness, because at the moment he is a monoconscious ignoramus, knowing nothing about masculism, because, quote, masculist consciousness hasn't come to Australia yet, I said to him. His reaction was one of utter contempt. He saw me as an old fart, a complete ignorant old-school sexist bigot. I saw him as a monoconscious, gullible lamb for the slaughter, the type of man who desperately needs to have his masculist consciousness raised. There are millions of such men who need to be educated into the hazards of monoconscious ignorance, who then become the victims of fluffy parasitism and worse, the victims of fluffy feminazi hypocrisy in the divorce courts. I felt sorry for him, and he was glad to be rid of me. There was absolutely no meeting of minds, which made me very conscious just how much work needs to be done by the Masculists and MGTOWs into educating the masses, the millions of ignorant men who are just waiting to be massacred in the divorce courts by a monoconscious, vicious feminazism. This is the end of part 2.